Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Mahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadhuaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabharu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So today is the most auspicious day of the disappearance of Srila Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. Babaji Maharaj is the disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he holds a very interesting role in that he wasn't so much like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, nor was he like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur externally. Internally, they were all the same, but externally, there appears to be a difference. Now, before we, actually begin discussing something about Babaji Maharaj, why should we even do something like this? He has gone, almost 100 years, if not over 100 years. I just can't recall the exact date at this point in time of his departure. And I was reflecting on this in a very practical way. And one thing came to mind. I remember growing up, and even nowadays, and you all may have seen also, that sometimes you visit someone's house and they have their ancestral, their father, their grandfather, the head of the home, generally very prominently displayed somewhere in the house that everybody could see. Why? Because they want to remember their roots. They want to remember where they came from. They want to remember, to whom do we owe the debt of gratitude that those who have paved the way for what we have today to whom do we owe that debt of gratitude? So similarly, when we observe the various appearance days and the disappearance days of the Lord's devotees, one thing we should know is that observing these days is not in any way different from observing the sacred days of Hare, or the days in which the Lord himself appears. Because in actuality, these devotees whom we have the opportunity to associate with through their recorded leelas or pastimes are directly Krishna Parishad. They are directly associates of Krishna. They are Gauranga Parishad. They are directly associates of the Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And just as the appearance days of the Lord is permeated with the special mercy of the Lord, then similarly, on these days, we can receive access to very special mercy of these great souls. So, Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, he is glorified or offered respect with the following mantra. Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambar Sambhode Padam Bhojayate Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, the spiritual master of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is renunciation personified. He is always merged in a feeling of separation and intense love for Krishna. And when we see Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, he's a Babaji. He's in the words of this verse, the very embodiment, Vairagya Murti, Sakshat. If you think about anybody who is renounced, he is Sakshat Vairagya. Whatever Vairagya is, whatever that represents, he is that completely. And we should know that his renunciation is not something he is trying to do to get something. For example, today is Ekadasi, and hopefully all of us, or many of us, especially those who are trying to become serious, would properly observe this day. At least on this day, we won't eat grains, and even more than that, on this day, we endeavor to remember Krishna more. Mahadava Titi Bhakti Janani, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that days like Ekadasi, they give birth to devotion within our hearts. So, when we observe Ekadasi, we take some austerity. We try to practice some vairagya, some renunciation of grains, and renunciation of any type of sense gratification. And we endeavor to increase our bhajan to Krishna. So we practice vairagya or austerity for the purpose of enhancing our bhajan. This is not the case with Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. His renunciation is a direct product of his bhajan. He is not performing vairagya to get or improve his bhajan. Rather, his renunciation or vairagya is a direct result of his bhajan. A very, very interesting thing. And therefore, in the second line, Vipralambha rasam bhode, he is completely absorbed. Padam bhojayate namaha. He is completely absorbed and merged. It is his very being. This intense ecstasy of Vipralambha, feeling intense separation from Radha Krishna. And because of that love for Krishna, there's nothing in this world he can find that can give him satisfaction. Therefore, he rejects everything. What is the use? If I'm feeling so much intense separation from Krishna, nothing can quench that thirst. Nothing can quell, can extinguish that fire that I'm feeling within my heart. and therefore I reject everything. This is his consciousness. That as genuine devotion in the heart increases, naturally we find that attachment to things that do not support that devotion naturally decrease. Param drishtva nivartanti, in the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. So this is Babaji Maharaj. He's not practicing renunciation. He's not practicing renunciation. Sometimes we say that one has to practice renunciation. Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, he is not practicing renunciation. He is the very form of renunciation. And that form of renunciation is as a result, it is directly coming as a result of his intense feelings of love for Sri Sri Radha Krishna. So he's a very, very special person. Very, very special person. And because of his external lifestyle, isn't it a fitting day that he decided to wind up his pastimes amongst us, externally, physically, on the day of Ekadasi, which by its very nature is saturated with love for Krishna. This day itself, Ekadasi, is saturated with love for Krishna, and we get the opportunity to experience that love through the voluntarily accepting, or the voluntary acceptance rather, of a little vairagya. Don't eat so much, take very little, and especially non-grain prasad. Increase Hari Bhajan, Nam Kirtan. Increase our devotional practices. So this is Gaura Kishor Das Babaji. A little about his early life. He appeared on November 17th, 1838. So he departed, practically speaking, almost on the same day that he appeared, in a very simple mercantile family in the village of Guyana, which is near to Tepa Khola in the district of Faridpur, that is located now in modern day Bangladesh. And in fact, many places that are sacred to our Gaudiya Vaishnava history originally are located in Bangladesh. There was a separation shortly after the partition between Pakistan and India, and this East Bengal became Bangladesh. So the birthplace of Rupa Sanatana, that's also in Bangladesh. The birthplace of Haridas Thakur, also in Bangladesh. And so similarly, Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj, he made his appearance in Bangladesh, in the district that I described. He was married at an early age, and he was married for several years, many years. And he made his livelihood as a grain merchant. He would sell grains. But unfortunately, his wife passed away after some time. And when his wife passed away, he closed up shop. He gave away whatever he had. And he immediately went to Vrindavan and accepted the dress of a Babaji. A Babaji is one, he doesn't have any external encumbrances, dresses very simply, but engages always on the meditation of Sri Sri Radha Krishna through the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then in Vrindavan, he engaged in Radha Krishna bhajan for almost 30 years. Almost 30 years, unbroken bhajan in Vrindavan. After those years, he became eager to have darshan of the deities of Gaura Vishnupriya at the newly revealed birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. This birthplace of Lord Chaitanya was revealed by the diligent and dedicated efforts of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and confirmed by the astute spiritual acumen and vision of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, who was over 100 years old, 100, well over 100 years old at the time of the revealing of the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, so much so that he could not walk. He was carried around on a basket by his servant. And if memory serves me correctly, I think the servant's name was Bihari Lal. And so Bihari Lal was carrying Jagannath's Babaji in a basket. And when he came to the spot which Bhaktivinoda Thakur had reconciled was the actual birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, he jumped several feet into the air out of the basket of Bihari Lal and exclaimed, Eto Gaura Janma Bhumi, that this is the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. And after some time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, with the help of many residents of Calcutta and the residents of Bengal, they erected a temple at the yoga pit and formal worship was begun. And so, wanting to experience that and have the darshan of these newly excavated deities, Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj made the trek. And by trek, we mean there was no Rajdhani, he didn't take a train, there was no plane, he didn't ride on a rickshaw, but he most likely would have walked all the way across India, from one side of India to the next, to perform his bhajan in Sridham, Mayapur. He, as I mentioned, was the very embodiment of renunciation. He completely rejected any bodily comforts. He made little effort to shelter his own body, and he made little effort to maintain his body. And these are some examples of that. He would sometimes live on the banks of the river, Ganga, wherever he was. And oftentimes, he would live under the awning or discarded awning of a boat, and there he would live. He would not make any, it was discarded, it was there, and he would sleep under it. He would not even make too much effort to eat. Sometimes, if he felt a little hungry, then he would eat some mud from the bank of the Ganga. And perhaps when he was in Vrindavan, he would eat mud from the bank of the Jamuna or from the banks of Radha Kund and so on. Do not try this at home. He was somehow able to survive. If by some fortune he had some grain, some rice, and he wouldn't cook it, he would soak it for some time in some water and he would just chew those grains, raw rice soaked in water. He had no fixed place of residence. As I mentioned, sometimes he would live under the canopy of a boat which was discarded. And at other times he would live in a latrine, not a toilet, nice, tiled, ceramic, clean. No, he would live in a latrine. And if the public toilet that any of us who have visited India is indicative of the standard of a toilet in India, then it is not a very pleasant place to live. And he would sometimes live in a public toilet, or sometimes he would live in a private toilet, his own toilet, latrine, not really toilet. And for clothes, sometimes he would roam naked, and at other times he would take cloth which was discarded at the crematorium, and he would just cover his loin. He had absolutely no interest other than chanting Harinam and associating with the very few devotees whom he saw as genuine. He had that uncanny knack for discovering who was genuine and who was not genuine. He could see into their hearts. It was in 1898 when he arrived in Navadvip that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saw him for the first time. And this was at Bhakti Vinod Thakur's newly constructed house, which was named uh, Swananda Sukhada Kunj, which is in the island of Godruma, just a short ride across the Jalangi, and you turn left and you walk some distance. You'll first find Surabi Kunj on the left, and then lower down on the right, just behind the train line, you'll find this house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is still maintained there, and some items of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur are still kept there on display, as well as some items which were of personal use to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. When he arrived at Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, he was wearing a cap which was made of tiger skin, and he was carrying a basket which contained some puja paraphernalia, both of which he had been given to him by the famed Bhagwan Das Babaji Maharaj of Kalna. It is not clear to me whether he received that in Mayapur or whether he received that from Bhagwan Das Babaji in Vrindavan. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he saw him for the first time, he was struck, especially when he heard him recite two verses or some verses of Raghunath Das Goswami, in which the Goswami reveals his intense love for Srimati Radharani. Bhaktisiddhanta was so moved by the genuine affection with which Gaur Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj was reciting these prayers that he imbibed the mood of those prayers as his own bhajan. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as was seen especially in his later pastimes, was extremely and astutely devoted to Srimati Radharani. I'll give an example of this. One time, there was a gentleman who came to visit Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he exclaimed something derogatory about Srimati Radharani, that Lakshmi is greater, something to that effect. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was caught in between a rock and a hard place, literally. This person has no idea anything whatsoever about Srimati Radharani, and therefore he's an offender. Should I speak something to educate him? But he's an offender. How can I speak something about the most confidential Swamini of my own heart before such an offender? And on the other side, if I do not speak something, then certainly the honor of Srimati Radharani will not be upheld. And he was so caught between these two poles. Should I speak something before the offender? But he's an offender, therefore I shouldn't speak. But then how will Radharani's honor be defended? And he could not decide what he should do, and he fainted flat on the ground. He just couldn't reconcile what he should do, and he just fainted. This was the mood of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's internal bhajan, which he received from the very first meeting with Srila Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. There was no formal introduction at this time. It reminds me of how similar the first meeting of Srila Prabhupada was with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Just seeing the young men, Narendra and young Abhay Charan, enter into the rooftop of the temple at Ultadanga Junction Road in Kolkata. He said, "You look like very educated young men. Why don't you preach?" The glory of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throughout the entire world. And famously, Srila Prabhupada remarked, who will listen to the message of your Mahaprabhu, of your Krishna? Certainly the most urgent business of India at the moment is to become free of the British rule. We have to kick the Britishers out. To which Bhaktisiddhanta replied, there is no greater need. There is no greater need. The greatest need is that we should preach the glories of the holy name and the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throughout the world. This is the great need. And Srila Prabhupada said, I felt so defeated for the first time. And in my heart, at that moment, I accepted him as my guru. Not formally, but in my heart, Srila Prabhupada said. So similarly, that mood of preaching throughout the world, from the very first moment that these two great souls met, that was implanted. And similarly, the internal mood of bhajan between Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, rather, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's internal mood of bhajan, he felt inspired by that very first meeting with Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. Later on, he was instructed by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that you should go to him and become initiated. For you to grow in your Krishna bhajan, for you to become mature, you have to accept him as your spiritual master. But as we know, this task was not so easily accomplished. The first time he went, he was bluntly refused. He was bluntly refused. I already accepted one disciple in the past, but he cheated me and he went away. Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj said, I have no time for this. I have no time for this. Next, he came back after some time and he said, please, you accept me as your disciple. He said, I will ask Mahaprabhu. And if Mahaprabhu gives his indication, only then I will accept you. So Bhaktisiddhanta went. After some time he returned. So did you meet Mahaprabhu? What did he say? I met him, but I forgot to ask. So later, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he went again. He said, well, you said you forgot to ask. What happened this time? He said, I went and I asked him, Mahaprabhu, should I accept this person as my disciple? But alas, Mahaprabhu didn't respond. So Bhaktisiddhanta, when he heard this, he felt so dejected. And he recited this one line from this bhajan. Koruna na hoile kandia kandia, prana na rakhibo ara. That if I don't receive your mercy, Koruna na hoile, then simply I will cry and cry and cry. Kandia, kandia. And what is the use of maintaining my life? Now, based on this instance, sometimes it is said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to commit suicide by entering into the Ganga. And I'm sure many of you would have heard that history. If I cannot, what is the use of my life? If he does not accept me, then there's no use. Better I end my life. But this is not so. He just expressed this bhajan, the sentiment of this bhajan, that if he does not accept me, simply weeping, how will I maintain my life? And if he said that, the nature of Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, he would not fall victim to a threat. I remember my grandfather would tell me a story many years ago. He had a friend who had a son, and the son told his father rather, that he wanted to get a motorbike. This was many, many years ago, like maybe in the 70s or the 60s or something. I want to get a motorbike. And the father said that I won't buy you the motorbike. It doesn't make any sense. So the son went to the mother and said that if you all don't buy me the motorbike, I will commit suicide. And the mother became completely panicked. And she went to the father and said, the boy said, if you don't buy the motorbike, we will commit suicide. And the father very calmly replied, which is cheaper, a motorbike or a coffin? And lo and behold, no motorbike was bought and no funeral was had either. The boy didn't go through with this threat. So Gaura asked Babaji Maharaj, if Bhakti Siddhanta would have attempted something so foolish, that would not have impressed him. But what impressed Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj about Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur is the genuine interest. He had genuine interest. And what was his interest? I do not want to be initiated. It wasn't that I want Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj as my guru. I do not want him as my guru. Rather, I want to be his servant. I want to be his disciple. A very, very important instruction. We may not be to the extreme, the pinnacle of surrender to Guru as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in his relationship with Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj. But certainly, we can take pattern from his determination. We cannot imitate the intensity of love of the eternally liberated souls that form our history and our heritage, but we can imbibe the essence of what they are teaching. So similarly, if we think that I have a guru, we have to be very careful in our consciousness. The better consciousness as described or exemplified by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in his relationship with Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, I do not have a guru, my guru has me. In other words, I am the disciple of such and such and such. He is my master. He is my master. He is maintaining me. I am not maintaining him. My donation is not maintaining him. But rather, my giving a donation is an opportunity for me to purify my consciousness. By following his instructions, it's an opportunity for me to be dragged closer and closer to the lotus feet of Krishna. So this is the example being set. So the consciousness of somebody who is initiated is not that now I am initiated, or the consciousness of somebody who is seeking the shelter of a guru is not that I want to be initiated. I want initiation. The consciousness should be, I want to be a disciple. I want to be under the discipline of the devotee of Krishna. And by being under such discipline, my life will become successful. And therefore, seeing that genuine interest, seeing to the core of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's heart, he relented. And he said, you go and take bath in the Saraswati. That Saraswati is not the Ganga, Yamuna Saraswati, is another Saraswati, which is a tributary to the Ganga. And so having taken bath and having returned, Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj gave him the tiger skin cap that he had received previously and the puja items that he carried in a little basket. And he also gave him some knotted string for chanting Harinam. This was in January of 1900. I will read a little from a book written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami. He did a brilliant biography of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in 3 volumes. I was inspired to purchase this book by His Grace Rajarshi Prabhu. And I just started to read it very casually. But when I started to read it, it was like the feeling I had many, many years ago as a student when I first read Srila Prabhupada's short biography. It was a black hardbound, paper-bound book with gold writing on the front. Prabhupada, he built a house in which the whole world can live. And when I started reading this book, it gripped me so much. The style of writing, the crisp and clear way, and the depth of research that Maharaj put into this book, it rings clear. And in this book, he uh, recounts how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur reflected on his uh, becoming the disciple of Srila Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. And I find to repeat it is not doing justice. These are actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's own words, which in themselves are very difficult to repeat. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur reflected on this incident of his approaching Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj for initiation. When out of false ego, I was thinking, I am a great scholar of mathematics and philosophy. Let any big pundit come at any time, day or night, I will cut all his propositions to pieces. At that time, I got the darshan of the lotus feet of Sri Gurudev. He ignored everything that was previously appreciated in me. My truthfulness, my moral and pious life, and my intellectualism, knowing them to be of little value. When I saw that he ignored whatever was good in me, I realized how good he himself must be. Who could neglect so many good qualities in me? What inconceivable wealth he must possess. Being neglected by him, I understood that there was no one more fallen and contemptible than myself. That was my actual identity. The very things that I had adjudged desiderata, such as scholarship and upright character, this exalted soul regarded as valueless. I apprehended that within himself, this noble personality possessed priceless treasure. I then pondered that either he's extremely puffed up or is exceedingly merciful. I then haughtily said to my Gurudev, you are a worshipper of that cheetah and debauched Krishna. So why would you be compassionate to somebody like me, dedicated to ordinary morality? Humbly and sincerely I prayed to the Supreme Lord for his mercy. Later, by his grace, I recognize, his grace meaning Krishna's grace, I recognize that without receiving the blessings of this peerless saint, and without serving him, nothing good could happen to me. When I accepted that and acted accordingly, and then received causeless unlimited grace of my Sri Gurudev and refuge at his lotus feet, I deemed my life fulfilled. I had considered my Gurudev to be unequaled in Vairagya, but somewhat short of learning. But he reduced to powder my audacity born of book learning. With the mallet of his mercy, he revealed that whatever I had adjudged to be the highest ideal was in fact most low and despicable. When by his grace that instruction first entered my ears, my diminutive brain lacked the capacity to accommodate such transcendental knowledge. But to all fools like me, he gave the chance to hear such lofty topics. I have understood that if the people of this world do not receive the same jolt that I receive from my Gurudev, their consciousness will not awaken. Therefore, I am telling everyone, I am more foolish than anyone else on earth. Please, all of you, do not be foolish like me. Do not live your life with the limitation of calculating consciousness. Discuss Vaikuntha Katha, and you will become a great person. I'm telling you what I've realized to be supremely beneficial. Can you imagine? Srila Prabhupada writes about Gaura Das Babaji and has often said that he could hardly sign his own name. He was illiterate. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was the pinnacle of scholarship. At the age of 16 years old, he was awarded the opportunity to sit on the chair of astrology in the University of Calcutta at 16 years old. At that time, there was a pundit who was sitting on that esteemed seat by the name of Vapudev Shastri, who had a very illustrious disciple who entered into a debate with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ripped to shreds any argument presented by this disciple or student of Vapudev Shastri. What does that mean? It means if he rips to shred his arguments, then it means Vapudev Shastri is shown to be inferior. It is said that this Vapudev Shastri, seeing the complete and utter defeat of his competent disciple, he passed urine and stool of himself on himself in that assembly. So this was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. At a very young age, he had already memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita, and not only could he recite it verbatim by heart, he could speak and elaborate purports to each and every verse. This is the capacity. And he is saying that I felt Kishor Das Babaji to be a little short of book learning. But he showed me that the book learning, which I thought was valuable in my own life, is less than stool in the street. And therefore he felt what he has is something more valuable. If I do not get what he has, what is the value of my life? So this is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's mood in surrendering to his spiritual master. In another place he says, on receiving the jerk of the lotus feet of Sri Gurudev, for the span of 1 year, I lost all sense of this external cosmos. I do not know whether any transcendental agent equal to him has ever appeared in this plane. How may those who are preoccupied with worldly lust, anger, and so on ever know him? In another place he says, I have been busy within this temporal sphere, trying to bring sense gratification within the grasp of my hand. I often thought by obtaining the objects of sensual enjoyment, all my shortcomings would be fulfilled. Certainly, I attained various rarely achieved goals, but my own personal deficiencies were never mitigated. In this material world, I have had the association of very high-class, well-born people, but noting their multiple inadequacies, I could not offer them praise. Seeing me in such a lamentable condition, at such a time of adversity, the most merciful Lord, Gaura Sundar, gave permission to his two dearest devotees, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, to grant their blessings to me. Because I was always intoxicated with worldly false ego, wanting to be lauded again and again, I was depriving myself of my own true benefit. But due to the influence of pious activities enacted in previous births, I came in contact with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, my spiritual well-wisher, my Prabhu, Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj, would often visit Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and stay with him. Out of compassion for others, Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out my Prabhu, Srila Gaura Das Babaji, upon seeing whom the extent of my worldly false ego immediately diminished. I knew that all living entities who have taken the human form of life were fallen and low like myself, but gradually, Observing the spiritual fiber of my master, I realized that only a Vaishnava could reside on this mortal plane and be of exemplary character. My Gurudev told me, reject your knowledge, purity, and aristocracy and come close to me. Don't go anywhere else. Whatever you require, as many rooms, houses, palaces, and mansions, and much scholarship, skills, self-control, and renunciation, you will get. Simply come close to me. Let there be a house. Let there be an entrance. Let there be learning. Do not be enamored by this type of thinking. Do not consider as necessities that which ordinary people accept as such. I was a fearsome debater, but with great kindness my Gurudev kicked out my pride in debating. Even in unlimited millions of lifetimes, I will not be able to find the limit of his compassion, nor will anyone else be able to do so. Although I am unfit, he recognized me as a servant, thus fulfilling my cherished desire, by which I may live forever. One time, I'll just read this last section here. Some years later, a gentleman attracted to the teachings of Srila Saraswati Thakur was accompanying him on a preaching tour in East Bengal. While they were coursing the waters from Goalando to Narayan Ganj by steamer, he posited, as a Goshtyanandi, your whole life and outlook is quite different from that of your Guru Maharaj, who was a peaceful Bhajananandi. Srila Saraswati Thakur excitedly replied, there is no disparity whatsoever in our purpose and intent. Indicating the clanking and whirring of the boat's engine, he explained that the moving parts were dependent on the battery, which, although small and silent, unmoving and unseen, was the source of the power for the whole operation. Similarly, he continued, my Guru Maharaj was sitting and chanting and didn't mix with the public, but he is the battery for all my activities. Without him, I am nothing. Speaking at the Samadhi of Gaura Kishor Babaji Maharaj in 1933, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur revealed that he received three instructions from Gaura Kishor Babaji Maharaj. The first instruction was, you should not make any disciples. The second instruction, don't associate with anyone. And the third instruction, do not go to the world of Maya. He considered Kolkata to be the world of Maya. So if we look at Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's life, he had many disciples. He associated with many people throughout his life. And he established a very beautiful temple at Bagh Bazaar in Calcutta. His first temple, in fact, was in Calcutta. So is it that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur broke or defiled the instructions of his guru, whom he held in such high esteem, as we previously heard in his own words? He himself revealed that actually, I completely followed to the letter all the instructions of my guru. I never made any disciples. In fact, anybody who came to me, it was an opportunity for me to serve them. So in actuality, those who think themselves to be my disciples, I think that they are actually my gurus. Because when I see the sincere intent in their own hearts for wanting to serve Krishna, the intent in my own heart becomes enlivened. And therefore, I don't have any disciples. They are all my gurus. But you are associated with so many. No. To associate with people means to take from them. I never took anything from anybody. The only thing I ever accepted in my entire life was what was given to me by my Gurudev. But somebody may argue, you were freely moving in Kolkata. No. I never went to Calcutta. I only went to the Gaudiya Math. And that is none different from Vaikuntha. That place where the Lord is being worshipped as the center of all activities, that place is not in the material world. It is none different from the spiritual world. And therefore, I existed in those places. I never was in Calcutta. One time, somebody by the name of Mitra, other places say his name was Madhu, but maybe he had both names, came with the idea of surrendering to such a renunciant who exemplified Krishna Bhakti. And he came to the Yoga Pit and he associated for some time with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he was very impressed by Bhaktisiddhanta's sadhana and his service and his scholarship. But he saw that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was engaged in so many worldly activities. He was engaged in management, he was engaged in organizing and so many things in terms of assisting Bhaktivinoda Thakur in running the affairs of the Yoga Pit temple. And he felt that he's not so renounced, he's a worldly man. And he went to Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. When he went to Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj didn't directly accept him, so he decided to stay in a toilet adjacent to Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. And he would chant also, he wanted to be a renunciant. And from time to time, persons would bring items of foodstuff for Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, which he would reject. But those foodstuffs which were rejected by Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj were accepted by this Mitra or Madhu, as the case may be. He kept them in his own toilet, bhajan toilet or bhajan latrine, and he would partake of that. Later on, the same Mitra developed illicit connections with other men's wives. And one time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came to see Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, which he would from time to time. And Mitra said, no, he's not here. He didn't want to see him. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his voice was heard by Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, who came out to see his beloved disciple. And in front of Mitra, he took his lotus feet and placed it on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's head. No, not now. And placed it on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's head in front of Mitra. And he said something very interesting. He said that you go and convey my blessings to your father, Thakur Bhaktivinod, that his bhajan be successful. But tell him he should come to Mayapur and be with me. I want to see him. You should tell him, come so he can be with me. So Bhaktisiddhanta, he was very, very confused. He looked at him and he said, is it that you are trying to trick me? Is it that you have given me the dust of your lotus feet with the express desire of cheating me? Or are you testing me? What is it that you are trying to say? Is it that Bhaktivinoda Thakur no longer resides on the bank of Radhakund? Or is it that you no longer reside at the banks of Radhakund? Which is it? If you could follow what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying. He's saying that both you and Bhaktivinoda Thakur together reside on the banks of Radhakund. So what is this you are saying that you want to see him? You are always with him. Is it that he is no longer in Radhakund or you are no longer in Radhakund? Either one of you must no longer be there. It can't be that both of you aren't there. And he smiled, being very pleased. And in front of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he called out to Mitra and he said, you should go, you should get a job, and you should get married. this life of renunciation is not suited for you. It does not make sense you be such a hypocrite by having connections with other men's wives. You are bringing the whole thing down. Just go away. And he revealed in front of Mitra that Bhaktisiddhanta was not a worldly man. He was completely attuned to the spiritual nature of his guru and also his father. One time, a message was sent by Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And the message was that you please leave that Khalistan, meaning the place of Kali, meaning Calcutta. You come to Navadvip and perform bhajan with me. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur smiled, understanding the intent of this message. He said, you please go to Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj and convey my blessings to him that his bhajan be successful. But also tell him that everywhere I step is not Khalistan. I am not located there. But with every step, I am engaged in the service of the Lord. I am never in the world of Kali. And this also reveals what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say of his own spiritual master and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So in this way, these are some of the glories of this great sadhu, of this great predecessor acharya of ours. That when we became connected to our own spiritual master, we immediately also became connected to all of these acharyas in an unbroken line. There's a verse where Yudhishthir Maharaj glorifies Mahatma Vidura. Bhavad Vidas Bhagavatas Tirti Bhuta Swayam Vibhu Tirti Kurvanti Tirtani Swantastina Gadaprata. That certainly people like you, my dear Vidura, my dear uncle, you are like moving places of pilgrimage. That you carry the place of pilgrimage on your feet, and therefore wherever you go, you transform it into a place of pilgrimage. Srila Prabhupada, in commenting on that verse, he says a very nice thing. He says that electricity comes from the generation house or the storehouse, and it runs through the lines. But if you want to get in contact with that electricity, you have to be in contact with the lines. And the lines also have to be in contact with the storehouse of electricity. And if you plug into that line, which is also connected to the storehouse, then you get the effect of electricity. So similarly, when we connect ourselves to our own spiritual master in the spirit of submission, service, and proper inquiry, we automatically become connected to the storehouse of power. And what is that storehouse of power? Krishna himself, Lord Chaitanya himself. And so when we are connected in that way, then naturally the mercy of the entire disciplic succession, including Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj, including Bhaktivinoda Thakur, including Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, including Srila Prabhupada, all flow through us. And to that extent, there is no insulation in us. In other words, qualities and attributes that are preventing the flow of that electricity which is coming from Krishna. To that extent, persons who come in contact with us can also experience that electricity which is coming from Krishna himself. Yes, baby.
How to put the picture inside it?
Okay, we'll fix it just all right. One ask Mama. I'll finish in a class, right? I'll come just now, okay? Be careful. Be careful. So similarly, when we have that quality in ourselves of reducing the level of resistance in our own consciousness, then to that extent, we experience the full mercy of the Guru Parampara, and to that extent, we can share it with others. Srila Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj departed this world on this day. Today is the anniversary of his disappearance. And a very interesting incident happened. He had expressed a desire that when he passed away, that his body should be dragged through the streets of Navadvip and his body should be thrown in the Ganga. And there were many persons who were planning to do that. Bhaktisiddhanta got news of this and appeared on the scene and said that I am the only duly initiated disciple of Babaji Maharaj, and therefore I lay claim to his body. And there was a commotion that was started. And the commotion was such that they were arguing for who would take claim. And so the police came and they tried to mediate this. And they said, but you have a claim, but all these people are Babajis and they want the body. He said, no, they may be Babajis, but if any of them has not had any illicit connection with woman within 1 year, let them come and touch his body. What to speak of 1 year? 6 months. What to speak of 6 months? 1 week or 3 days even. Then they can come and touch his body. And the police replied, should we do an investigation if anybody, gives some claim? And he said, no. If anybody says, I accept their word for it. Nobody came forward. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur erected his samadhi in Navadvip area. But after some time, the Ganges took the samadhi. And so Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur established his samadhi later on the banks of Radha Kund in Chaitanya Mat. So on a day like today, we can pray to such an acharya as Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj that please let me get your mercy, that my affection for Radha and Krishna can also increase. And by that increase of my affection for Radha and Krishna, my desire to enjoy the things and the people of this world can simultaneously subside. So with these words, I will stop. And if there's anybody who would like to add anything, I saw Rajarshi Prabhu is there, Mother Panchatattva is there. If anybody who wants to add anything, please feel free. Please feel free to share. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Rajarshi Prabhu, Panchadasa Maji, would you like to add anything?
For anyone?
Hare Krishna.
Shanta
Shanta Vigraha Prabhu, I don't know if you got the opportunity or you got the time to do any research on the Bhishma Panchak. I don't know if you could share anything on that.
Unfortunately, I didn't. It was one of those days. I just didn't get a chance to do it. Whatever I did this morning, like circumstances beyond my control. I had no chance whatsoever. But there is a resource on ISKCON Desire Tree. If you search for Bhishma Panchak, there's a very nice resource there. But I didn't get a chance to go through it in detail. But it's very easy to find. You could just search for how to observe Bhishma Panchaka. One of the links that would come up is a link that comes off of ISKCON Desire Tree. And it's full with very nice information. So that's there. Very easy to understand, very well organized also. So that may be of use. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do anything with it. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Anyone would like to ask any questions, or if anyone has anything to add? Okay, Shanta Vigraha, I had one question. Today I was listening to Glorification of Babaji Maharaj by His Holiness Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He was narrating the story of Babaji Maharaj, and while he was narrating the story, as you have narrated some of those stories here this evening, this thought came to my mind. Some of these pastimes are quite esoteric. The level of Babaji Maharaj's renunciation and everything, it's not something very easily understood by people people like me. And then that was playing on my mind all day today. And then you read this glorification of Babaji Maharaj by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who out of his humility was saying such things that he himself did not understand Babaji Maharaj. Of course, we know that is his humility, but it kind of highlighted more those doubts that I had in my mind, that were playing on my mind. How should we, as great grand disciples of all these wonderful personalities, understand and not commit any offenses against these personalities in our mind, having any kind of doubts, so on?
So how we understand the acharyas is how our predecessors have presented the acharyas to us. For example, through the teachings of our own Srila Prabhupada, through the indications given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We have to digest what they have given to us in order that we understand what came before us. It is not possible to understand these personalities by our intellect. Just like it is not possible to understand Bhagavatam by one's own intellect. Na buddhya na chatikaya. You must have heard that verse in the course you are studying. So similarly, it is only when we receive the mercy of those who have come before us, and this was, very clear from what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was saying, and it's a very simple process, but very difficult to sometimes execute. Bhagavad Gita, the indication is directly given. How do we come to the proper understanding? Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadikshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. It is not that we get to know anything about the absolute truth by our own effort. That was also clear from the incident of Mother Yashoda being attempting to bind Krishna. The effort must be there, or the interest to find out, but the actual proper understanding only comes when we receive that person's mercy. And how to receive the mercy? And tad vidhi pranipatina pariprashnena sevaya. We have to surrender, pariprashna. We have to make relevant inquiries, and sevaya. We have to render service, not for the purpose of getting some revelation, but we have to render service for the purpose of pleasing that person. And when they become pleased, then naturally the understanding comes within our consciousness. But this is the formula that brings that realization. As per my understanding, based on how do we understand these personalities, it has to come in parampara. We can't, imagine to understand such persons by, just as it's impossible to understand Krishna by our own intellect, it is not possible to have darshan of a devotee through our intellect. It is only by the mercy of that devotee and by the mercy of devotees. Rajarshi Prabhu, you would like to say something on that question by Hare Kirtan Prabhu? Okay, I think. Okay. If not, Mother Panchatattva, you want to add anything to that response? To Hare Kirtan Prabhu's question?
Sorry,
Okay.
Shanta, I was away from the
Okay.
for a minute
Okay.
there.
Okay. Is that all right for now, Hare Kirtan Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So
Okay,
if
so I saw a question in the chat
Mhm.
by a devotee named Galaxy S10E. Hare Krishna, is there any spiritual benefit for oneself by remembering and celebrating the lives of previous spiritual masters, such as Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj? Yes, there's immense spiritual benefit for remembering and celebrating the lives of previous spiritual masters, such as Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I was saying this in the beginning of the talk, he says that days like today happen to be Ekadasi, but also has other potencies in it. Namely, it's the day that Gaura Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj departed from this world, that Madhava Titi Bhakti Janani, that by sincerely observing days that are dear to the Lord and to his devotees, the inclination towards devotional service to the Lord becomes more and more pronounced within our own consciousness, within our own hearts. Madhava Titi Bhakti Janani. So by carefully observing these different vratas and these festivals, we stand greater chance of getting some drop of mercy from these great personalities, whose mood and consciousness and very being naturally permeate this day, especially. Of course, we can get their mercy on any day, but especially on these special days, their mercy is more readily available. Just as in the rainy season, there's a greater tendency for rain to fall, just as in the summer season, there's greater tendency for heat. In the winter season, there's greater tendency for snow and cold temperatures. Similarly, on these particular days, then there's an increased chance that we can get their mercy, because it is said that these personalities are especially merciful on the days of their appearance and disappearance. Physically, they may externally appear to have died or come out of our vision, but they are always with Krishna. That is just within our vision. But these persons are eternal personalities who are eternal associates of the Lord. And by observing these days, why does it give that benefit? Because Krishna becomes pleased when we try to render worship and service to his devotees. So by endeavoring to please these personalities and to worship these personalities on their special days, then we get not only their mercy, but we also get Krishna's mercy, like that. Right? So there's always spiritual benefit for observing these days. These days are non-different from the appearance days of the Lord, and therefore they give great benefit for one's devotional service and devotional practice. Is there anything else? All right. It
Yes.
seems that yes, Hare Kirtan Prabhu.
Hari Bola, Hari Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Babaji Gaur, Kishor Das Babaji Maharaj.
Maharaj ki jai.
Ki Jai. Babaji Shanta Vigraha, Bhaved Big Beard ki Jai.
Well, you don't have to do like me. I tried externally to get his mercy, but by imitating his appearance, but that is not the recommended way.
Thank you very much for your presentation tonight. And we down this side here will pray for the mercy of the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, that we can get some of the blessings of you participating and presenting all these discussions for the next month or so. Whatever credits come to you, please share a little with us, as we will be overwhelmed with calendar and year-end stuff. So we will be out of it for the next month. Nevertheless, somehow or the other, by the grace of Hare Kirtan, we are getting to hear a little. even while printing is going on. So thank you very much. Y'all take care and be safe for the rest of this year. Let us all take as much precaution as possible continuously. Don't slip up for a moment. The scenario in the world is very heavy. The indication is not good. Many friends and well-wishers and relatives, families, name it, are passing away or being affected heavily by COVID-19. I just want to remind devotees that we all, in our every presentation, in our every discussion with devotees, and our every messages to devotees and friends and well-wishers, whoever we are dealing with, let us take a stand to remind them that it is no joke, it is no fake, it is for real until some miracle happen, and hopefully that the vaccine that they're talking about will come with a positive effect, that sometime, I don't know, in the near or distant future, that life on the planet will become something resembling what it was before. But in the meantime, until that time, we all need to be safe. We cannot afford the loss of another devotee due to COVID-19. Thank you very much. Srila Kishor Babaji Maharaj ki.
Ki Jai.
So if there's nothing else, we'll close for tonight. And what is the next program? Saturday, Maharajai Lalita, Tulsi Viva Kata. We're all invited to be early. Tune in, join, encourage your friends and devotee colleagues, God brothers, God sisters, encourage everyone to please join in. It will be a special kata. This time we are not gearing up to go to the beach and bathe and hang out, of course. Maybe somebody will go quietly to the seaside, to the riverside. Otherwise, I have 1,008 holy water, so you can get some and take your dip in your bucket of water in your homes. Otherwise, be safe and tune in, join for the session Saturday evening. And then, of course, Sunday program. And Sunday evening, also, we have a wedding at the temple, so that will be also live. The last daughter, the small daughter of His Grace, the late Radhakanta Prabhu, are going to get married 7:30 Sunday evening. It should be a very beautiful ceremony. First time we are going to do a evening, nighttime wedding at the temple in Guyana. So it should be something exciting for all of us. So you can join on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube, but except the feast, you need to come physically for that. So I don't know how you'll do that. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Gaura Kishor Babaji Maharaj
Ki Jai.
Hare.